Welcome back to It Starts Now, the happy hour of business and finance. My name is Stanley, and I have a special guest here today. He is the drummer for the musical on Broadway called Wicked, and he's here to talk about the history of Broadway and the future, what's going to happen in the future, what he predicts to happen in the future. Right? Please welcome a dear friend of mine, Matt Vander Ende.
Yeah, very good, yay.
So Matt, how you doing today?
I'm doing good.
All right, good.
I'm doing well.
So Matt came over today, and we've been trying to connect for some time now. And Matt, for a while now, we're trying to put the group together so we could have this conversation. Because when we were at a barbecue together, right? Or
right.
it was by the park, by the water,
right?
And
by the Whitestone, right? I think
right
so,
by
yeah.
the Whitestone.
Yeah.
And we were having this discussion, and we started talking about the future of Broadway, and the fact that Matt said Broadway never closed until recently with the COVID. It could be snow up to the top of your head, and I'm exaggerating, obviously, but it never closes until recently with this whole COVID thing. So we're gonna dive into that. But before then, I just found out that my guy is a single malt drinker.
That's right.
So what I did, and we got him Glenlivet, and we're gonna enjoy it as we have a conversation. So Matt, let's dive in.
Mm-hmm. Please, and thank you very much for having me come do this.
No, absolutely,
much appreciated.
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Thank you. We're glad to have you on.
Yeah.
So Matt, with Broadway, first of all, let's dive in on how did you become. You were a regular musician.
Yeah.
Right? And we're going to touch on the history of your background. But then how did you get from that aspect of the music industry into going into Broadway?
It's interesting. It's also an interesting transition. I mean, I went through school and education, the conservatory in San Francisco. I went to Interlochen in Michigan. And I was heading in the direction of a classically oriented, maybe a jazz big band oriented musician, but at a young age I was bitten by the metal bug, heavy metal, like in the 80s, 90s, right. Metallica stuff. So between all of that, I was working in bands and doing recording sessions where I'm from, which is Oakland and San Francisco Bay Area. I had been studying with a guy for several years. He's my mentor. His name is Greg Sudmeyer, and he's a fantastic teacher. He was also a music director. And he had said to me, you should consider thinking about doing Broadway musicals. And at the time, I was thinking, Broadway musicals, like what I did in high school? Because, they have you dabble in it a little bit. And I let it go for a while, but, touring and recording sessions, and I had just gotten married for the first time. And there was a time to kind of decide, do I want to keep being on the road? Do I want to keep pursuing recording sessions or pursuing a band? And I decided to try out the musical and Broadway stuff. And I really liked it, and I gravitated towards it. And it stuck to me, it worked for me, and I worked for it. And I just worked my way up in San Francisco and the Bay Area, San Jose, Mountain View, Oakland. And I eventually made a transition to move to New York City. And I had made a lot of contacts working for one particular theater company in Santa Clara, called TheaterWorks. Mm-hmm. And TheaterWorks was doing a lot of out of town Broadway, pre-Broadway shows, and I had met several good people. I kept in contact with them, and when I moved to New York, I just started making trips and meeting people and going to go watch them play on a Broadway show. And when I finally moved, I was given the opportunity to sub on Fiddler on the Roof when it was at the Minskoff Theater in Manhattan. Mm-hmm. And then from there, just started subbed a few more shows here. I had been recommended to the contractor for Wicked. His name is Michael Keller. And I was recommended to him by the original drummer of Wicked. Mm-hmm. His name is Gary Seligson, as somebody who would be a good fit to start and originate the first national tour back in 2005. Mm-hmm. And so that's how that started. And it just kind of went on from there. About a year on the road, Gary had left Wicked to go pursue Tarzan, another show. And he works all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I took over for him. And then I've been at Wicked for close to 15 years now.
Okay, so trying to understand the timeline. So there was a point where you auditioned, or you didn't audition. You just subbed in to become permanent.
Yeah, sorry, I skipped that.
Okay, I'm trying to understand.
Auditioning can be one of two things. You can have like a traditional audition for a Broadway show or a tour. Mm-hmm. My audition for Wicked was subbing at Wicked. The music director that was at Wicked at the time, Bob Billig, was looking for a drummer, and I was just getting ready to start to sub there. Gary had given me a shot. So my first couple of shows of subbing there, that was my audition. Like, how do I fit into the music? How do I fit into the orchestra? How do I fit into the show? Mm-hmm. And they said, yeah, we like this guy. So they gave me...
So was it a sound they were looking for?
It's a sound and a feel and an approach. Okay. There's a couple... It's tricky. Gary had set up a certain feel and approach and a sound to that show with the drum book. Now, they wanted that, but they also want a personality, because when you're going to take over a chair or originate a chair, mm-hmm. There's a lot that goes into it. It's a personality, it's the way you get along with people, it's how you play, clearly. It's almost as if your playing has to be 100%, and that's a given. Mm-hmm. So from there are nuances, like how do you fit in, how do you work with the band, and most of all, how do you work with the music director? The music director has to be really comfortable with the drummer. Right. So once I got that, after a year on the road, the supervisor, Stephen Remus, my understanding, had come out and watched me play a couple times at the Lincoln Center in Washington, D.C. And they had taken some auditions in New York, and then they decided to give me the job. So I came off the road and I took over the Broadway gig. They felt that it was probably like the best fit. Okay.
So you touched on something that you were managing personalities.
Right.
All right. So how challenging is that when you have, because, when as you're coming in, mm-hmm. you're rookie to the team.
Right. Completely.
Yeah. And now you have people that are already established. They already have a name.
Right.
And you got to manage those personalities. How did that work out?
It's tricky. There's, as you know, New York can be a rough town. And people can give you a hard time, and there's hazing, and there's who's the new kid and what have you. Right. And you gotta, in some weird way, you have to be accommodating to everybody that needs something, but you have to stick to your guns because there's a reason why they hired you. Mm. And so you need to dig in enough to say that, you made a choice with me, and this is why you did it. And I have to have enough confidence to say, this is what I'm doing. But on the other hand, you can't just come in there like a bull in the china shop. Because you're basically the square peg they're trying to force into a round hole. And a drummer is like changing the transmission of a car. Mm-hmm. It doesn't feel right. Some people may go, I love the way he plays. I love what he did differently. And other people are going to be like, it sucks. Right, it's just because it's different. So it doesn't matter. It's just, it sucks. So it takes time. Mm-hmm. And once it starts to come together, then they're used to you. And anybody that subs for you, they're just like, it sucks. So it's a trade-off, but you can't let the rough edge of a city like this get to you. You have to be able to take the bull by the horns to a certain extent, and diplomatically figuring out how you do that. But you ultimately always have to have the music director's back. The music director is the boss. Mm-hmm. The music director's not happy with you. They're going to tell management, and they're going to tell the contractor, and they're going to tell me. Okay. And then if they need to make a change, they'll make a change.
So not only you got to manage personalities, but you got to manage up.
Yep. It's a bizarre position because I'm in a position where the chair can train wreck a show, and it can ruin the feel of a show. Mm. I'm in a position where the music director is management. I'm not management. I'm a member of the orchestra.
Right.
But if I don't have their back, and to a degree that they need to feel comfortable that I'm with them, because they have to direct the show. Right. They're worried about the show, and they've got people on top of them left and right. The show came in, 2 minutes late tonight, or came in a minute early. What's going on with the tempos? I can't hear this, or something felt too fast, and so they've got to deal with all that. they need to know that the drummer's there. And there's always a subtle tension of like, at some point the drummer, when I first started at Wicked, there were no consistent click tracks. And the click tracks can set aside a tempo, which takes the idea of like, well, was it too fast or too slow tonight, completely out of the equation.
Right.
So when we were, playing together, the trust that is there is that, one music director will say, I trust you with the tempos. And I watch and listen to a metronome all the time, make sure we're right there. Because the choreographer needs that consistent every night. Mm-hmm. And when the conductor is saying something like, it felt really slow tonight, I need to be accommodating, but say, it wasn't. Trust me, it wasn't.
Right,
and that's hard because they have egos, we all have egos, and you got to kind of figure out how to dance around it in a polite enough way that you can say, I'm going to have your back and I'm going to go with you in any way that you want to.
Right.
But trust me, when I'm digging in a little bit, I know what I'm doing, and I'm never going to steer you wrong. So as long as they have that confidence, it's a good relationship. It really is.
But you have to cultivate that along the way.
It doesn't happen overnight.
Right. How long did it take you to establish yourself?
The Broadway company?
Yes.
Several months, if not close to a year. It can be a while. I mean, the orchestra was pretty comfortable with me. I would say several months.
Why is that?
Well, the several months are, it's like a, what do you call it? It's like a proving ground. Well, it's not a proving ground because you've already proved yourself to get to that point.
Right.
But you need to prove yourself that on Wicked, that show at the time I took over, they knew was going to run for at least another decade. We're pushing 2 decades now. That's true. And so they want to know that, is this the guy that's going to stay with us and stick with us for that duration of time?
True.
And it's also not like, are you just looking for this? Are you looking at this as a stepping stone? Mm-hmm. Are you going to bail in a year? Are you going to bail with the music director in a year? I mean, it happens. People do it all the time. But is it, are you going to stick with the show? And is the show going to feel comfortable with you? And once, that period kind of starts to take on its own form and people start to get used to you and you get along with the orchestra. And it's a hang factor too, how well you hang outside of the
Very
of the
important,
game.
right.
Yeah, it's really important because you need to develop these relationships, especially within the rhythm section, And once that happens, I mean, sometimes and I should say sometimes it happens right away. There's like it clicks.
It clicks,
but
yeah.
then how the arc of how things go. You'll have like a rough period, and then it'll start to come back, and then it'll just kind of do something like that. So that's why I give it like a several months kind of aspect. Plus, I'd known the show from being on it for a year, so I know the technical aspect of it. But finding the nuances of having the orchestra fit together, and there's a groove that happens, and once that starts to settle in and it's consistent, then they feel good.
Yeah.
But it can take, music directors come and go. We've had, I can't even think straight. I want to say, off the top of my head, I'm going to say 5 or 6 at the Broadway company alone since I've been there. Yeah, and there's guest conductors coming up all the time. So, like.
Does it change the face or the sound or the
music director?
Yes, when they change.
Feel.
Okay,
it changes the feel.
Okay,
it changes the pacing, and so having the music director, once I was there, the music directors are like, they completely lean on me their first couple of months of breaking in, and at that point, then they shape the show the way that they want to. And granted, this is all done under the approval and through stage management and the creatives. The creatives are the choreographer, the writer, the producers, the supervisors, the orchestrator. These are all people that created the show. And once they're happy with everything, then we just coast. We just keep going. As long as the people are happy, they keep coming in, things are good.
Okay. You touched on 2 things. One, I like what you said about the hang time is very important because when I was in corporate America and I was leading a group of people, is one thing when you have your direct reports that have a good relationship with you,
right?
But it's another thing to hang with your peers,
right?
And then you have to establish that relationship and even manage up too, because the more you hang out, the more they get a feel for you, and then they say, okay, this person is cool, we could bring them on board. But the other thing you touched on was Wicked's been around for a while, and I actually went to see one of the plays. And why is it is so like it's going on 2 decades, and it's still popular?
Right.
Why is that?
Yeah, it's interesting. The percussionist name is Andy Jones, and he and I, man, we hung a lot when I first took over, all the time, and we still do, but it's not as much as it used to be. And we used to discuss this. It's a classic story about human involvement in society and how people function, told behind the backdrop of a famous American tale, The Wizard of Oz. So through these characters that are beloved, everybody around the country and a lot of people around the globe, they know this story. And it is told as kind of a prequel, and then it is told through relationships, Elphaba and Galinda, their relationships in love, relationships in friends, relationships in enemies, kind of covers it all. And so it seems to touch a chord. And people like it, and they keep coming back. And there's a fanatical base following for this show.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it's crazy. We sometimes go outside, and there's like little girls dressed in an Elphaba witch outfit. It's really cute.
Does that does that motivate you guys? Like
it does.
Right.
Yeah, it does.
It has to, right?
Yeah, it does. There's as a musician, we're constantly figuring out how to create and do our craft. And a Broadway show can stagnate that because it's a product. And when it's as big as
you got to continuously service that product or revamp that product. Right.
And the same percussionist said to me, you take over on a show and you're like, you've hit the top. I'm, at the time when I took over, that was the number 1 show in the city, and it had been number 1
for a long time,
and it stayed number 1 for a long time. And now it's like still maybe 2, 3, maybe behind Hamilton.
It's still
It's still like,
but it's still there. It's still among the top 3, top 4.
When they were discussing reopening Broadway, it's considered one of the top 4 legacy shows.
See,
So
that is a legacy show.
Yeah, and that said, once you take over, it's easy to go, well, what's next? What am I doing now? Or, where's the next aspect of the horizon? And you work so hard to get there, and you're maintaining a product, and you can become a little like, well, what am I doing to create my playing? What am I doing to, you go through all of this in your head. And when you start to become stagnant, because it's not about you, it's about the show and about the people that are buying the tickets, and them being entertained. You want them to constantly come back, and I have to make it sound like myself and everyone else in the pit and on stage like it's our first performance, like we're there.
I like that.
Just going out for that first night.
How do you keep that energy though?
Right. And what Andy had told me is that some nights when you're down and you're like, what am I doing? Go out in front and watch those little kids walk into the show for the first time. They'll remind you of why you're here. They'll remind you of what it is that makes it special for their experience and their parents. And now at this point at Wicked, their parents saw Wicked when they were young, so they're bringing their kids. And in the pit, I'll try to go into a fantasy head. I know this might sound a little funny, but I'll go into a fantasy head, like, remember that energy and that feel the first time you played this show? So
you're psyching yourself
terrified. Terrified the first time I played the show. I'm like, oh. But you focus and you go into it, and ultimately you got to love your instrument. Like, I love playing the drums. The sound of the drums, the sound of the instruments, and the cymbals. And so I'll have periods in the show or different nights of the week where I'll focus on listening to one thing. What's so beautiful about this cymbal or what have you. And every once in a while, the supervisor will come in and he'll kick our asses. He'll say, the energy's lacking here. The orchestra's not playing, well enough at this point. The orchestra's not pushing hard enough here. We're not, whatever it may be. So we have tune-up sections and stuff, but you got to stay focused.
Yeah. Let me share with you my experience when I first went there. I'm not a Broadway person. I've never been to Broadway. I don't know anything about it. And someone said, let's go. And let's go watch Wicked. And I was like, what? Like, yeah, you got to go watch Wicked. I said, okay. And we get there, and the moment you walk in it's an experience of its own.
Yeah. It's
because,
designed that way.
Yeah, because the way the crowd is so engaged before the curtains didn't even open yet.
Right.
Nothing happened yet.
Yeah.
But the rush into the seats and the anticipation and the thrill of what's to come, or I don't know how to explain it, but the energy in the room before even the lights turn down is already high.
Yeah, it's so cool that you see
it was just an amazing feeling. And I said, I can't believe this. All this for a Broadway show?
Yeah.
And throughout the duration of the show, I felt like every moment was hitting a climax.
Yeah.
Like it went from, okay, I think it reached its peak, then it went to a next level. Then it went to the next level. And I found myself being more entertained and more engaged with the whole show. Then finally, when it all ended, I was like, wow, that was amazing. Without having no expectations.
That's great.
I was like, walked out like, wow, that was amazing. And I would do it again. And I have. I went to a Broadway show after that. But had that not happened, or that experience didn't happen, I would have been turned away to Broadway.
Exactly. And that's precisely the approach that Wicked has. That's what they designed it that way.
Yeah.
They want people to have a complete experience. So you walk into the Gershwin and you're in Wicked, you're in Oz.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's got, our lives outside of, our lives are crazy, especially this last year, right?
Right.
So when you walk into the show, you want to be taken away from all of that. You want to be able to enter the theater and have 2.5 or 2 hours and 45 minutes of not thinking about work, not thinking about the kids, or not thinking about the parents, or thinking about, the traffic or whatever it is.
Right.
And they designed it specifically so that you're completely immersed in an experience and that you can enjoy the show. And you can go on this journey with them for 2 hours and 45 minutes and walk away and feel like, wow, that was really great.
Yeah.
It was worth it. And some people say it helps change their lives. It helps change perspective of how they're seeing things,
Well, I think it has an emotional aspect to it.
It
definitely gets you. You have a out-of-body experience with it, because you wouldn't think that at a play you would enjoy it so much, and then when you leave, that emotional aspect of it lasts for a long time.
Yeah.
So I think whoever vision was this to bring it to stage, I think they did an amazing job. Did amazing job, because it's that emotion that carries on from time, throughout time. And I think that's very important. But you did touch on something. It is a product at the end of the day. And to continuously service that product, to make everyone leave that room feeling or taking a piece of it with them home. Because that's a piece of history that they keep. Right. And I think that's challenging of its own.
Yeah, it's a huge challenge. I can't imagine... When a show hits, and then there may not be any rhyme or reason why it does. Some people knew that Wicked was going to be a huge hit right from the get-go, because the book written by Gregory Maguire was a huge success. And the critics were very lukewarm about the show when it first came out. And some people were like, we'll give it 6 months, and the show just took off. And I think protecting that feeling and that magic that people have, and trying to make sure that they get that each time they enter the theater is really important. Right around the 10-year anniversary, the company had bought all of us tickets to see the show. And it had been the first time I was going to see the show in 10 years. And I was, there's like legendary stories of a show that just gets tired, and it's like an old beaten horse, and it's just grinding out the last little bits of what have you.
Right.
And I knew that the ticket sales were still strong after 10 years. After 10 years, it was still ridiculous. But
you traveled around the world with that.
I didn't. I only traveled the United States.
Okay.
I wish I had traveled the world.
Okay.
But an odd caveat is, by the time I had taken out Wicked's first national, I was like, I'd love to be able to travel the world with this. But those days of traveling an American drummer around the planet on a Broadway show are they were over at that point. You know, with the ability to have drummers in Australia, London, Germany, where else did Japan, play exactly like the Broadway drummer in New York. It was now, you know, just did the United States or whatever. But they bought us tickets to see the show on our tenure, around the 10-year anniversary. And when I saw the show, at first I was like, oh, God, I don't know how this is going to be. And it was just as good as the very first time I saw it. I mean, like, just as good. The story lands, the acting lands, the sets still land. All of that after 10 years could have been old, tired, but it wasn't at all. And I was like, this is going to run a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, 20 years I think is an understatement.
Yeah.
In some form or not, it could run decades.
So I got a question with that though. With everything that we've been seeing with COVID and everything we've seen this whole 2020, right? And this is the decade of streaming right now.
Right.
Right. And what's been going on with outside being shut down, do you think that eventually they're going to take this Broadway show streaming, like a lot of concerts that they're doing right now?
Right. Well, I think the business model of Broadway as it was back in the beginning of the year is going to have to find its feet again. I mean, the entire aspect of who we are as people, the rug was pulled out from underneath us in one day. And yes, I would like to believe, in my internal optimism, that Broadway and business and every aspect of society is going to find a happy marriage of being forced to go online and streaming and what we used to do, which is all in-person human experience. There will be some sort of, merge of that. But ultimately, it's too ingrained in our DNA to be completely removed from an experience that's like what we're having here. Right. Like this, what we have here, is different than if we were in two separate rooms connected in a camera.
That's true.
And so the same thing with a Broadway show. Like you sit there and you look at it, and the actors are engaged in the audience, and the audience is being engaged, and it's all right there. You lose all of it when you go stream.
I'm guessing both sides lose out.
Yeah.
The consumer and the artist, or the product itself.
Right.
Because sometimes that motivates you depending on how enthusiastic the crowd is, right?
Right, exactly.
So
you play off it.
You play off of that, that energy, right? So
same with concert venues too. I mean, like you take a Beyonce concert. I'm just pulling a name out of a hat, right?
Right.
She's in front of, 50,000. No, let's say average arena size 25,000 people on any given night, right? That feedback you get from the audience, their experience and your experience is a shared experience.
True.
And when you go online, you may create a much larger audience, and you can sit there and watch it, but I'd like to think that we're going to marry the two. We're still going to go back to the human experience of, we're very social in who we are.
So I'm trying to gather what you're trying to say. Correct me if I'm wrong. So you're saying that there's going to be, based off your optimism, there's going to be a combination of live streaming while having an audience.
Yeah, I think because this was brought upon us without any control. You know what I mean? Like this was just like, this is life right now.
Right.
And it's going to be a year to 2 years before we start pulling our heads out and go, where's the sunlight? Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And in that process, there's going to be a mad rush to try to go back to what was normal, but it's going to feel awkward. Back in April and May, I was like, yeah, it'll come back. And as time went on, and you start.
How did you feel during that time?
April?
Yeah, around April.
Here?
Yes.
Oh, dude, it was dark.
Yeah.
Because both my wife and I were sick. and we both lost our jobs. And we're watching friends in the industry, both industries, sick or die, neighbors sick or die. You know, neighbors in my building, 3 people in my building didn't make it.
Yeah.
We're listening to ambulances every 20 minutes to a half an hour to and from Elmhurst Hospital, where this is the first time in my living memory they had to have huge semi-trucks fill them up with bodies because there's too many people dying.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is just, it's too hard for me to wrap my head around, you know, and you just kind of deal with it. And when it starts to become over, you know, I'm 51, so this is close to 51 years of living a normal, quote unquote, human existence in society. And then it's over just like that. And you're like, well, what is this, you know?
Right.
And as we're adjusting as people in society, I think that we're starting to get used to what's coming down the road. And I think humans are always looking for the next, you know, like, okay, well, we've been forced upon this, but we're going to take this with us as we start going into the next chapter. You know, we're going to take this with us as we start developing what's happening next. And whatever that next chapter is, I don't think it's going to be just like it was back in January.
I don't think it can.
Yeah, right. And but it'll be something different. And you know, as far as a performing musician, I hope that it includes musicians and entertainers being able to make the same kind of, you know, living that we used to. You know, I certainly hope so. I mean, I was just mentioning to a friend of mine yesterday that, like, Broadway makes more money than all of the major sports franchises in New York City in 1 year combined.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a lot of bread, and they make a lot of money.
That's a
and
lot
it's a big part
big
of the
bag.
economy of New York City.
Wow.
It's one of the reasons why the New York City economy cannot fully come back until all of this reopens. I mean, we're kind of stuck in purgatory. But we're in survival mode. There isn't any federal funding coming into the arts.
No.
Phil's not getting anything.
Actually,
Met's not getting anything.
no.
I mean,
Right.
Broadway's not getting anything. And musicians are just cut off. Actors, everybody, we're just completely cut off. We're completely reliant on unemployment insurance from the state. And we can't go to another show to work. We can't go to another symphony to sub. We can't go to another bar to play a gig. It's over until this comes back. And so everyone's rushing to go online to get some like trinkets of teaching and some online recording and whatever else that we can do. And it's the first thing to go. And it went hard. And it's going to be the very last thing to come back. When society's decided that, okay, we're rounding out our culture again, that's when the arts are going to come back.
Right.
And the big fear is, well, what's going to happen to the arts in the meantime? Are we going to be taken care of? Do you want the same kind of level of artistic creativity and entertainment that you had before this happened? Because if we're not at least taken care of, I don't think anybody in the arts and entertainment industry expects to be taken care of like the way the automotive industry would be or the way the banks would be. It's just clearly not going to happen.
Yeah.
But to have really kind of nothing, I mean, do you want to rebuild from scratch? I mean, that could take decades.
Right.
I mean, we're all here because this is what we love to do.
Right.
You know, it's in my DNA to play music and create. But I have so many friends that have left New York City, and I don't know if they're coming back.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if they're like, the entertainment's dead. You know, musicians are dark. we're so used to getting the short end of the stick our entire lives. You know, one time I was on tour with my metal band, and they decided not to pay us that night, and they paid us with a box of pizza. It's that kind of stuff that happens like all the time and with musicians. And so that's why we fight for contracts, and we fight for equal rights, and we fight for, you know, to keep us paid so that we can live like normal human beings. You know, if you want the cream of the crop in New York City, we can't live on $50 a night. No.
You know? No.
So anyway,
that's one of the things that people don't talk about. Yeah, when you scale, you definitely make a lot of money.
Right.
But there's no benefits. Like you living on, I guess you're waiting on your next hit, right? And you constantly living on your next hit. So I understand, and I did hear about a lot of Broadway people are going where we went to last upstate. We went upstate,
Hudson Valley.
Hudson Valley,
Oh,
and I'm hearing that a lot of people, a lot of the Broadway people are heading up to Hudson Valley because, to your point, that people are saying that Broadway is dead, and if it is the last thing to come back, that's a long time to be waiting to get some revenue to come in.
yeah, it's too long to wait, to be
Yeah.
honest with you. I mean, like, so let's use me for an example. I'm in an incredibly privileged and blessed position that I'm on a hit show that will come back.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm probably going to get this number wrong. I mean, there's like some 40-something houses in New York City that do plays, Broadway musicals on the Broadway level or something to that effect, including off-Broadway. It may even be more than that. And it employs an incredible amount of people. And the trickle down to the restaurants and the hotels and the cabs and all of this stuff. So when it just disappears, why spend, $3 to $4 grand to stay in your studio apartment every single month when there's no work?
That's true.
And if you need to go online, a really good friend of mine, she is I believe she's still the dance captain for Aladdin, and she teaches exclusively online now. She does like a whole package where she teaches Broadway dancing, for like an hour online. And in order to do that, it's better to, if you have the means, get out of town and go live someplace where you have some space and you can enjoy not being in the city, because the city doesn't have anything to offer right now.
Right.
Like you go into Midtown, into Times Square, it's like, whoa.
It's a ghost town right now.
Completely.
Yeah.
And I mean, I say this, but like Broadway will come back. I mean, it's definitely will come back.
Well, if it's one of the biggest markets, if that space generates so much money,
Yeah.
it's only a matter of time before it comes back. But I don't. The thing is, it's not a necessity, right?
Right.
So,
You're right.
so that's why
exactly it.
it's like leisure time. It's more like a luxury thing. So for it to come back, it requires everybody to get to a good space again, right?
That's right.
And so unfortunately, a lot of people cannot manage till then, right?
Right.
And to your point, you said, why
hard for-
spend
it's
$4,000 or
hard for us,
$5,000 a
right.
month, right?
Yeah.
I might as well go someplace where my money the amount that I'm getting right now to make it stretch until the time being. We had a lawyer that was on the show, and she said, New York City is one of the most resilient cities out there. So we're definitely going to come back. It may take some time, but we're definitely going to come back.
There's an interesting quote. I was listening to a Stephen Dubner's podcast on Freakonomics, and I don't remember the economist's name, but he's like a typical New Yorker. And the title of the podcast was, is New York City really dead? And his answer was like, over our dead bodies. It's just not.
I like that.
It's the city. It's too gritty. It definitely had its knees knocked out from under us. There's no doubt.
Yes, I think that we're at I guess we're at a period where we're being tested to see.
Yeah.
We're already strong by nature, right? New York City
right.
is one of the toughest
Right.
cities out
Right.
there.
Right.
And it's one of the toughest places to survive. That's why we got that quote that says, if you could make it in New York City, you could make
It's
it
true.
anywhere, right?
It's true.
So I think right now it's like more like a gut check to say, okay, now that this is happening, what are you guys going to do, right? And we are going to bounce back. It's just a matter of time for us to bounce back. But that doesn't mean the gut check didn't hurt.
I completely agreed. I mean, I think, one of the things that drew me to this city was just how ambitious and like how, driven the city is. It's like it just doesn't stop. It's like if we're going to get knocked off our feet and the rest of the world's having some way of being able to figure it out, we're going to figure it out.
We're going to figure it out, yeah.
And
we're the city that never sleeps.
Yeah, right. I mean, there's no question the city's going to figure it out.
Yeah.
I've had some friends say, like, it'll never come back. And I'm like, I wholeheartedly don't agree with that. It could be years. Some people think it could be 5, it could be a little more. I think if New Yorkers dig in, and I mean, a lot of people left the city I'm reading and hearing that there are people that were never invested in the city in the first place. You know, they're here for a transient time period, their job, and they're like, "Oh, I'm out."
Yeah.
But New Yorkers that have been here for a couple of decades or longer, born and raised, and they're like, "Oh, no, we're gonna figure it out.
Yeah.
Fine. If you want to count us out, we'll prove you wrong."
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and I'm from Oakland, California, and I've
Yeah,
lived here, you know, 17 years now, and I've taken on this like, no, it's not, man.
Yeah.
And then if you think it is, and you really think it is, then we will figure it out.
Yeah, well, it's a matter of time.
Yeah, it's like the 70s. There's a cool little docudrama series called The Empires of New York on CNBC that's out lately, and the early episode was just how coming out of the 70s was rough in this city. You know, but like hip hop came from that.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
I mean, that is like the birth of a in itself it's an empire. I mean, it changed the face of entertainment as we know it.
Mm-hmm.
That came from right here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and
that ecosystem created so much wealth.
Oh my God!
Yeah, because something that came out of nowhere, and to this day has generated so much wealth and created so much opportunities for others, and took care of a lot of families. And it was birthed in a hard time.
It really was.
So I'm thinking that there's something that's going to birth during this time that's going to turn it around.
Yeah, I agree. There's a I take a deep breath because it's like, wow, how much pain do we have to endure before we get back to that moment? Because I would like to be here in that exciting moment when the city's exploding again. When the city's like, oh, this is fun.
Yeah, and then we look back at it as, you know what, they counted us out and now we're here.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I mean, good luck counting out the city. Go ahead and bet against it. I think it's a bad bet.
Yeah, I agree with that. I hear the passion. You coming from California, but I hear the passion for New York.
Because this adopted city of mine has given me everything that I've ever wanted. You know, I mean, I love growing up in California and Oakland, and that's my hometown. And I love my family, and I love every part of the West Coast and what it afforded me growing up and what I had done. But what New York brought me was, this is a city where you can dig in and work your butt off, and it'll pay off.
Yeah.
It will reward people for working hard, and it will. New York won't take care of you. You have to take care of
New York.
Yeah, because it'll spit you out in a heartbeat.
Oh my God! It's one of those things that these call it walk in the jungle or walk in the concrete. I forget the phrase of it, but you're literally in a jungle where it's not just survival. It's just you have to learn how to adapt. Yeah,
you do. Yeah, right. And you have to find your niche.
You got to find your niche because New York is one of those things that you're not gonna come and change New York. You're just gonna adapt to the way
no, that's exactly
it
right.
is.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And then you gotta find you gotta find yourself. You gotta find those little crevices and pocket yourself there, and then work to accomplish to a point where you can dictate certain things, but it just won't happen. It's just New York is one of those tough, gritty cities that you just gotta you gotta be strong.
Yeah, I think I also like the approach of New Yorkers where they really just don't take no for an answer.
No,
you know what I mean? I mean, it's like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make it happen. For me.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah, and it's admirable because it's not easy living here. It's a very dense city. You have to live in an apartment, and everybody's got to do it.
Yeah.
Of course, there are those examples of people that come in and just everything's given to them.
True.
But in general, you got to come in here and you need to pay your dues. Is that a right way of saying it?
Yeah.
You pay your dues, but you work your butt off and you make it pay off for you. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Some people, you pay your dues and you kind of get it in the back end, but you got to make it work for you. You got to make it reward you. And when it does, it's pretty big.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
yeah. Let me ask you this. We're gonna circle back, but
okay.
What made you get into becoming a musician? Like what? growing up. How was that like?
So I mean, music has been slowly pushed out of the school systems in general, like across the board. Excuse me. And at the time when grade school, they required that you approach either a vocal choral or some sort of musical instrument.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided to go into a musical instrument. And they kind of test you and see where they think, where your talents are. And I'd somehow just gravitated towards the drums. I mean, I remember somewhat vividly, they used to do these parades down the hallway of like, play an instrument, and sing. And I remember just like, the drummer's the coolest thing ever. Just playing along. So I gravitated into that. Mm-hmm. And once I got into it, it really took to me, and it worked well with me. And I had found out later that I have some relatives. One of them was, I think she's a great aunt that, worked for the Oakland Symphony. So there's some lineage there somehow. Mm. And I stuck to it, and I was really good at it. And it was one of those things where I put in many, many hours of work, and it would pay off. People would like, he works really hard and he plays very well. So, we're going to keep giving him opportunities. And I just kind of kept going through that route, and it was something that helped me a lot, especially like when I was 17, 18, my dad had died of AIDS, and this was in the 80s, and it was rough on the family. It was rough on my peers. It was rough on me, and so I dove into music, and music was there. And it didn't talk back to me. It didn't tell me how I had to do it. Mm-hmm. It just was there for me to dive into and find myself, find out, what I want to do, mm-hmm. and how I want to do it. And it's great. I mean, I think, I was just like trying to put together a little website, and I'm like, music is definitely a DNA. It's a part of the DNA of the human soul. It really is. It's something that's been with us since the beginning of time. And it spoke to me, and I love it. I mean, I really love it. Yeah. And even in times of, like right now where it's like depressing and I don't have much inspiration, we were flying out to California to see my mom, and I put on an old Tane Watts as a drummer. And I put on one of his records, and I was listening. I was like, oh man, that's right. God, this guy's just such an unbelievable player. And so I'm like thinking in my head, as soon as I get back, I'm going to set up my small little kit, and I'm going to start working on this and listening to the cymbals again, And it just inspires me immediately, because you can fall in those ruts of not having any inspiration. Mm-hmm. And I can't imagine. I mean, I don't know. I've never worked in an office space. I've never worked behind a computer where you just kind of punch in whatever it is that you're doing. Mm-hmm. But music's hands-on, and it's creating, and it's constantly evolving, and you never stop learning. Yeah. I mean, your entire life, there's always some new avenue to learn and move into and do something different. And it's like the other night I was down in my studio and I was practicing, and it's kind of like, so I pulled up an old book and I went through a pattern that I had worked on years ago, right? And I was playing. I was like, why can't I play this right now? What's wrong with me? I don't remember to break it down. And next thing it's like a couple hours go by, and I'm like, there's that feeling again. I just accomplished something. I just did something for a couple hours that I wasn't able to do a little while ago, and I kind of reconnected with the side of of who I am as a musician that easily slips away with music. It's a use it or lose it, Yeah. I mean, you could be a Mozart, sure. Not everybody is.
Not everybody.
Most people are probably like me. You just have to work your ass off to get anywhere.
Yeah.
Let
me ask you something. If somebody wanted to get into Broadway when it comes back,
right?
What would you say was one of those contributing factors that help you along the way?
You can't let what's going on around the world in music and entertainment discourage you. You can't let the fact that it's different now. It's a small society of people that have connected and have worked in. You can't let that discourage you. When I got into Broadway, I threw myself into playing musical, being a, so we're calling it Broadway drumming, and that's the easiest way to just kind of categorize it. But it's basically being a multifaceted musician in the area of playing drums and percussion and approaching different styles of music. And you need to throw yourself into it. You need to have the passion that this is really what you want to do. And if you find that this is what you want to do, then stick with it and go with it, Be good at cultivating relationships. Be good at being a good person.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell that emphatically people do not like to work with difficult people. It's just no-brainer. If you're a difficult person, you're going to struggle no matter how good you are. But you can be a very, very, very good player. You don't need to be the best. You don't need to be exceptional. I mean, you need to be great because you're going to have to compete in New York City, so please.
Right.
But you work really hard and you got a lot of passion behind it and you're good at it. Just stick with it. It's going to be hard. But if it's what you want to do, then do it.
Yeah.
Work in all different levels of it. Because I loved doing it, so I didn't care if I was playing at a high school or at a regional theater or at a, like a laureate theater or a touring theater in San Francisco, a Broadway level, or on Broadway or off Broadway or off Broadway. Playing the show and being a part of the musical creation of that night is what's great. And if you come from that space, I think you'll be fine.
I like that.
I
definitely like that. But thank you so much. This has been an awesome.
Oh
interview,
man, thank you. I really appreciate you allowing me to do this because I feel like it's not enough attention is paid to what we do as artists,
especially on Broadway.
Yeah, especially on Broadway in the city. I mean, as I'm listening to either Congress, and every once in a while they talk about the arts. They kind of throw it into the last sentence. We need to make all this money and blah, 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 and get funding and the arts, and articles and what I read from coming out in the press. It always mentions the cast and the crew and the company, but they never mention the musicians. And it's a Broadway musical.
Yeah.
There are live musicians down there and a group of 5 to 25 that create this music for the paying audience every single night, and we work really hard to do it. And all we want in return is just enough acknowledgement to say that they appreciate our hard work.
Yeah.
It's not. So yeah, but thank you.
No, not a problem. If you guys get an opportunity, just go on YouTube and put in his name. There's a clip where he's going off, man, and it's like,
oh, you did? That's right.
Well, actually, there's two clips. There's one where he's going off, and there's another one where shameless plug. He had a Delta hat on, where he was representing for a family member that worked. But it was like I was watching him play, and it was amazing. So if you get the opportunity, just please go check it out on YouTube. Thank you so much, everyone. It's been awesome as always, and we appreciate you guys tuning in. And thank you so much again. Have a good night.
Thank you.